Hello everyone and welcome back. We're going to be continuing along creating this typewriter here. It's for me been a bit of a hot minute since I've recorded the last episode. It might have been about a week or so. I did mention, I think in the last part or two, that I was starting some contract work. That was eating up quite a bit of time, so this is definitely more of like a side passion project to sort of be able to bring you guys this tutorial. But it's good to be back. I did sort of have to look over all of my notes on this to remember exactly what we were doing, but we're going to be creating these cylindrical end pieces. They're a little bit different on each end, this side being complex, the other side being very simple. We should be able to get through all of that in this part. So this part might be a little bit shorter, maybe not, but that's the goal of this. I'm also still a little bit sick, mostly just a bit of a cough, so if you guys could excuse me for that. Mostly over it though. But yeah, so let's go over exactly what we're making. So this end piece here, they all seem to be slightly different. The most common one is to sort of have this sort of sharp gear shape, this Coke can looking thing, this ribbed knob, and this end piece. That's definitely the most common one you're seeing here on the end. And then the other side here, this is just this kind of rounded knob with the spiked gears. We're going to be starting with that spiked piece. Excuse me. But the challenging thing about that is there really isn't any angle that is focused on that specifically. You can see it peeking through in all of these. And we sort of have little hints as to what it is. This image itself is really good because it shows us that it's kind of, there's an outline with these spikes, but then it's hollow on the inside. And I was trying to find other reference to confirm that. And you can see it here, how there's sort of a gap. So we're going to be trying to work with that in mind. We can also see the positioning of it relative to the other pieces. So let's go ahead and make that. We can start, of course, we put this placeholder piece here. We can start with this guy. It's definitely positioned between these two things underneath this here, which is nice. So I'm just going to duplicate this piece. And here, I'll leave this right there. And just try and mirror the thickness of it. It's definitely a pretty narrow piece overall, about that thick or so. And like I said, sort of positioned right here. Just trying to get the scale of everything. Might as well delete this guy since we don't need it. Let's get the scale of it relative to everything. Honestly, based on where that is and how this is lined up, it's already pretty to scale how it is now. I think with the spikes hanging out, we might want to shrink it down a little bit. And then there's that gap that we discussed. So how exactly are we going to connect it? Well, first of all, I'm going to grab all these faces and extrude, and just extrude these faces in. I'm trying to get that gap there. So it seems like it's deleted like this, like it's just a ring. Where it gets kind of tricky is how does that then connect back to here? And we can sort of focus on that afterwards. First, we're going to have to fill up this hole. I'm just going to select this loop, shift, select this loop, and then we can shift right click, bridge. It seems to have not bridged correctly. This will happen from time to time. To fix that, I find that if you just bridge one edge and then go for the full bridge like so, it's smart enough to sort of realize, hey, this is how these are connected. We'll sort ourselves out around it. So that's how I get just a ring. So how are we gonna get these sort of spiky parts? There's many ways we could do it. One way that I would try is maybe to extrude these faces out, and then this might be very cumbersome, but if we then sort of take every other edge and extrude it in, no, that wouldn't work. Let's think about this. To get sort of a spiked look, we could extrude out, and then where it says keep faces together on, we can turn that to off. We can, I want to see if offsetting does anything. Not necessarily. But in a sense, if we have these separated and do what I was thinking before, that should do the trick, right? Yeah. It's just going to take a long time. I wonder if there's got to be a better way to do it. At least this is a way that works. Like, we're going to get that shape. So essentially, I extruded them with the faces unattached so that there's these sort of separation gaps. And if I hit D, I can move our pivot to, say, this corner here, sorry. And then sort of snap this edge down. And we're creating those cuts. Then we can D, click off, reset our gizmo, and just sort of continue. It's a very long process. I'm going to just do a quarter of it and then use our mirror tools, because doing this all the way around is just going to take way too long. So let's go ahead and delete all the faces that we're not going to need. Because yeah, we definitely don't have to do this all the way around. It's just going to take too long. Yeah, so this is exactly cut properly, I think. I guess we'll soon find out. Okay. Just continuing along. And this is why using our pivot to our advantage is so important. Just vertex snapping it and moving it down. And of course we got to merge our vertices. And then essentially we can just duplicate, rotate, duplicate, rotate, duplicate, rotate. Mesh combine on all those guys. Merge all those vertices together. And we successfully got that sort of spiky shape that we see over here. Even might want to make it a little bit thicker. We got pretty lucky. It seems like the amount of spikes as well is pretty accurate. I was just sort of trying that out and it kind of worked out. But now it's kind of a matter of how do we address this gap, because it obviously can't just be floating for no reason. Let's see if I can find that original reference. Yeah, it seems like it connects in. Maybe it's like every 3. Like this part, we're going to sort of have to take some creative judgment to see how exactly it would come together. I'm thinking maybe I'm just doing a pattern of 3 on, 3 off. And if we extrude that in, we sort of get that kind of shape, right? It does look pretty bad to do it just like this. I don't like these big triangle shapes. Let's try that. I then went ahead and deleted those faces. I want to see, can I bridge these across? I can. Okay, this is starting to look like something I'm a bit happier with. If I connect all of these. it's more of a proper ring. I can tell that it's obviously not as smooth because we're missing some of these edge loops, but I like that the concept of this more, at least. I'm just going to go ahead and put a cut in the middle of all these, just holding shift to get it to snap right to the middle. Cool. And then if we grab these, should be able to scale them uniformly and bevel them, which gives us the same circular shape. Cool. From here, all we have to do is extrude in. We can get out of isolation mode and just sort of cup it like so, and bridge it all across like we did at the start. Cool, so that's how I kind of came up with that gear idea. Like I said, we don't have any super clear reference other than there's some sort of connection piece here. It might even look like it there, but there's definitely a gap and it's rather thin. So how accurate is this? It's hard to tell, but I was looking for a while for some proper reference. And considering how hidden it's going to be, I think that's going to be just fine for this specific piece. Center pivot on that, freeze transformations, delete history. Now we're on to this one. Let's see if we can find some more reference. It's definitely a much simpler shape. Yeah, so it's basically just a cylinder with some bolts in it. I just kind of wish I could see the other side of it. But I guess that's not going to happen. We also know that it is sticking out outside of this guy. And because of so, I might even grab this piece and pull it out a little bit. So let's go ahead and start making it. Maybe it won't even be a big deal that we can't see the back side of it because it is pressed up against here, and the only way you could even get your camera in there would be to jam it like right here, which isn't really going to be possible. So I'm going to want cylinders, a cylinder that's equal to this, so I'm going to be using our good old favorite Smart Duplicate Face. So we have this guy to work with. I'm going to turn the color back to the original and scale them up a bit. It seems like all of these pieces are more or less the same scale. So let's try and match this more or less. We're going to need to extrude it about this thickness, which looks to be about so. I'm going to isolate it just to make sure the back, yeah, I thought so. Whenever you're sort of extruding from a like plane or a single face like that, or something that isn't three-dimensional, sometimes you get these, so I'm just reversing the normals because you don't want it to be staying black like that. It's going to give you some funky results later on. The next step of this, of course, is to sort of punch it in a little bit. So I'm just selecting these faces on the front. Once again, to do that, I'm selecting one face, shift period to grow selection, and then just deselecting the extra stuff there. Control E to extrude. We can then just sort of scale this in with the handles. Going to extrude this in, trying to mimic about how far deep that is. Doesn't seem to go in too far. About so, and then it seems to sort of cup up. It's like concave, like so. So maybe the best approach would be to put it not as far as I'd initially like, but then once again extrude like so, and put a cut in the middle. This way I can pull this back so it sort of dips in a little bit. Maybe even pull this one forward, and then just bevel this guy. Maybe add 2 segments in there. Just gonna play with the distance on all of this stuff. Yeah, that seems to match it pretty well. I am going to want to hollow this part out. It seems like this tube is going through it, not pressed up against it. So I'm going to select these faces, Control E, extrude this in, and then holding Shift, I'm going to push it back, which is just essentially extruding it back, like so. In fact, if this pipe is going all the way through, it'll probably punch through to the other end. So I'm thinking if I should just ram a Boolean through instead. I'm going to Control Z all of that. And smart duplicate this face, scale it down a little bit. So it's sort of hugging the pole. Let's isolate this guy and make it 3-dimensional by extruding. Nice. Yeah, we can use this as a Boolean. So let's isolate these guys. We're going to want to punch it through. And this should be pretty seamless since this is all lining up perfectly. Freeze transformations, delete history, but let's go ahead and save anyways, just to be safe. Okay, so we can go to our DC Bool Manager, Shift select on our cutout mesh, make sure it's on difference, and delete history and base objects. Just to be safe, I'm going to merge these vertices, and we should be good to go. Let's auto smooth that. Nice, we got that. It does seem like there's some screws being punched in. I want to see a bunch of different reference on that. It seems to be slightly different for every single one of them. Yeah, just like some bolts sticking through. They might even not have like a big cutout behind it, so we might even not have to use a Boolean for that. Just want to find another one just to confirm that's the actual look of things. If we can find one here. Yeah, it just kind of seems like it's more or less resting on top. I guess that's going to mean we're going to have to adjust this a little bit. It's a little bit of a harsh transition. Because if we're going to have bolts resting on it, they can't just kind of be floating unless we do cut into it, which I'm thinking might actually be the better idea here. I'm going to select all these guys actually and scale them down so it's not as much of an extreme transition. And you know what? Let's go ahead with the Boolean and cut a hole into it and then fill it with a screw. That way it's just easier to maintain. It has a proper home, and it has a nice clean bevel around it when we do bring it into ZBrush. So it'll be easy to sort of produce that anyways. So all we have to do is make some cylinders. Just gonna vertex snap it into place. It seems like they're lined up horizontally. In the middle. And this is nice too because it sort of has all these edges around it. So I know when I cut through, it's not going to be a total cluster or a total mess, because it can easily connect to things without it getting out of control. It's not going to be affecting a lot of stuff. It's only affecting stuff inside of this these 4 polygon squares. So we'll put one there. Put one on this side. Mesh combine. And then just like before, we can do a new Boolean operation. Delete history in base objects. And we're good to go. Let's go ahead and put our bolts in there. I'm just going to borrow one from over here. Cool. Scale that up. Push it out a little bit. Rotate it. Rotate this guy. Cool, and that's that whole part done. We're on to this sort of ribbed one. Seems pretty simple. Let's see if we can find more reference of it. This one's definitely the easiest to see since it's all the way out. Oh, this is actually a good reference for it. It seems a little bit different, but basically the same concept. This one, very similar in shape, seems to be the same size. The only difference is this sort of ribbed grip pattern, and the material's a bit different. It also sort of has these plastic imperfections. But let's simply start by duplicating this guy. It does seem to be a little bit thinner, and I might even argue that it's a little bit smaller in size as well. We are going to have to make some changes to this. I'm going to go ahead and gut the entire, like all these components in the middle, just because this stuff's definitely overcomplicating things. So let's just delete all of this. Delete these guys. This back can stay the same, but I'm just going to want to bridge these over. Might even delete that. Select these faces and smush them down so they're all even. And that's more or less the general shape of everything. This seems to be smaller. And then since we scaled it down, we're going to have to bring this back up and around. But the main part is the outside, the ribs there. I also kind of want to get this ring before we move any further. That's going to be pretty easy to produce. All we're going to have to do is add an edge loop, bevel it, and just make it really small, maybe a 0.05. And then just extrude it out. Or maybe Control E rather. Give it some thickness. And then add an offset of something really small, like 0.08, 0.01. Yeah, and then just let it go like that. That way when we soften it, It's very subtle, but that ring will definitely be there. And you can add a couple of those. They're just going to be stuff we're going to bake down. It's not actual geometry. But yeah, it's just a really quick way to add in some extra detail. I might go ahead and add another one in actually while I'm at it. 0.05. .005. Okay, cool. Right. So this has a bit of a lip to it before it has the ribbed part. So let's go ahead and add that. The easiest way would probably be to add a cut here and then extrude all of this out. That way we get that sort of stepped lip. And then to get the ribbed, that's really easy. It's actually kind of similar to how we did this gear looking thing. I'm just going to extrude these faces and keep faces together. Just going to turn that off and affect the offset. Make it very subtle, like 0.05. And then we can turn the actual size of the extrusion down to like 0.05 as well. We already kind of got it. Let's change the offset to maybe a bit more, 0.075. And then since we have all of them selected, I can just scale it out a little bit. And that's the ribbed one for you. If we smooth it, this is obviously not an accurate smoothing, but it's still getting us the shape. Pretty much exactly what we're looking for. So when we bring it into ZBrush and we have more control, that's going to be looking pretty good. So that's essentially that piece. All we have to do is cap it off with that metal component at the end there, and then we can switch things over to the other side. The other side will be much, much quicker. Before we do so, I'm going to tuck this in a little bit more. Like so. Just want to get a good understanding of how much space is in between. I guess there's a bit of space. And this one might even seem to come across a bit thicker. Cool. Right, this end cap. What exactly is going on here? We have some sort of metallic plate coming out of the middle, extruding forward, and then a cap at the end, and some sort of connection between the two. So let's start with this sort of metallic ring around everything. These guys might be a little in the way, so I'm actually going to select grow selection with a shift period and just sort of scale them out a little bit so we have some more breathing room. Yeah, let's work on that metallic piece. I'm going to start off by smart duplicating this face. Let's go ahead and isolate that guy. Scale this down. I should just really be keeping this on screen. Going for this sort of rusted piece. But we can extrude this out a little bit. Let's make sure the other side isn't inverted. It is. And now I'm trying to figure out if this cap is part of this here, or if it's something different. I'm going to assume it's something different. I'm just going to actually take this and shove it back in here. Because when we look at this guy, yeah, it's going all the way through, but that's like a lot of texture space it's going to be taking up for doing essentially nothing at all. Visually, it's not really doing a lot. Like we can see it here and here. Like it really makes me want to just cut it off here. In fact, I'm actually going to go do that. So I'm taking this piece here, and I'm taking these ends. I'm going to extrude them in. And I'm just trying to match this size. I can go ahead now and delete them. And bridge them across. The reason I'm doing this is just to sort of get that bevel. This is, of course, is not going to be in the final model whatsoever. But it also means I can now take this, cut it, snap that to the end, and we can just sort of cut and delete everything that's in the middle where it's just not visible at all. Like we don't need that. This is taking up a ton of texture space, and it's just never going to be seen. So let's delete that. We're now, of course, going to have to cap it off on both sides. Cool. And that takes us back to this guy, which I'm saying is a different piece. Having it being bolted down makes me feel that way, because this piece in the middle would be so secure it wouldn't need to be bolted down for any reason, unless the reason it's bolted down is to connect this, but I don't think it warrants its own sort of bolts for that. Let's go ahead and duplicate this guy. We can then delete this. Let's just shift right click, merge to center, and do the same with these guys so we have a cylinder again. I'm going to move the pivot to the back there so we can snap it into place. And I just want to be covering over this black spot now. And mimic the size of this. Seems to come out about so. I just want to see how this is connected to the piece in front of it. I do see the bolts, which we'll be adding. But I feel like there was other reference that did a good job of showing the connection between those two. Yeah, this was a good one. So I think that's where the bolt was in the last one. Is there something in the middle that's connecting them? Interesting. This is why it's so important to find multiple pieces of reference. Yeah, see, like this one looks like it's being connected in 3 places, and then there's bolts in the 3 missing places. That's how I'm interpreting it. So that's exactly how I'm going to go about that. I also kind of like how this one has a hole in the middle and it's kind of ribbed. It's just more visually interesting. So I'm going to mimic that. Start by ribbing it. I'm going to extrude in a little bit and just sort of extrude that out. It's easy as that to get that detail. We can then delete that unused edge loop. And then we're going to need 6 holes, 3 for bolts, 3 for connecting to this dial at the end. Pretty simple, pretty straightforward. I actually want to thicken this up a little bit. And then one hole in the middle. The hole in the middle we can actually make right now, just by selecting all of these, extruding this in, and punching through. I'm just going to leave it like that. Like people are never going to look down that. So it's just going to be normal information anyways. So right, we're going to need some cylinders to punch through. Let's isolate this guy. Create polygon primitive cylinder. Rotate 90 degrees. I'm going to snap it directly to the center for now. Scale it down. To get it directly in the middle, we can add an edge loop and snap it to the 50% point. And then we can just sort of scale up. From here, what we can do is we don't need this edge loop anymore, so we can delete it, control backspace, and move our pivot to the middle. Control D, rotate here, Control D, rotate here. I'm just trying to get this to be triangular. More like that. Yeah, so then we can mesh combine. I feel like that's not perfect, because if we yeah, that works. Just gonna scale this up a little bit. And I think these are too big. I don't want these to cut as much. So I'm going to use something we've done before where we select all the vertices. And in our move tool settings, we can go to normal and drag in where it says N. And that's going to sort of squish everything in uniformly. So it's a bit smaller in size. Nice. We can Boolean this. Thank God this is all just going to be normal information, because trying to make sense of this geo is be a total nightmare. So we're in luck in that sense. Let's go ahead and delete history, freeze transformations, and set up our Boolean. Click, shift click, new Boolean. And I'm going to drag it forward quite a bit and delete history and base objects. Cool. We're going to want bolts in here as well. Just duplicate from a pre-existing one. I'm going to set my move settings back to world. Just vertex snapping that guy into place. That's a pretty cozy fit already, which is nice. Cool. So that's that. We're just going to have to get these basic cylinders in. That should be pretty easy. And then that sort of twisted knob at the end. And then we're already onto the other side. So we're making some pretty good progress pretty quickly. With this piece complete, we're just heading to the back and we're going to fill this guy in, which is definitely a good feeling. So let's finish this guy off before we celebrate too early. Going to duplicate this guy over again, do a very similar method as before, where I delete these, merge to center, merge to center, and this one's cool, it's a bit thicker, like so. It's about the same size as this. But it's tapered, so this sort of comes in a little bit. It's about that far away. This vert seems to be unaligned. Let's just snap that in. There's a hole, so we can go ahead and get that just by extruding this in. I'm just going to make this normal information, so I'm not going to actually punch it through. If you're wondering when to make it normal information and when not to make it normal information, it's mostly a scale thing. Like, this is such a tiny hole on such a more complex piece. Adding physical geometry to punch a hole through where no one's really going to see is just not worth it. So that's why I'm choosing to make it like so. I'm going to taper the end. And we're just going to use cylinders connecting from here to here. We'll never see this side of it, so I'm not worried about cutting in. And the only other thing is this definitely has some sort of grip on it, but that's... I don't even know if our map will have enough resolution to pick that up. Either way, I don't think there's a lot of point in modeling that in. We can add that in with a texture very, very easily. Modeling would take quite a bit longer. So I'm going to leave it smooth for now. Let's smart duplicate this face. Extrude it forward. Clean up the stuff on the back. It's all black. Flatten this out. We can just go ahead and snap it here. This should already be aligned. Gonna scale it down a little bit. But from here we can just sort of duplicate it around. Just gonna move the pivot to the end so I can just Control D, snap, Control D, snap. We might as well make these one mesh because they're never going to be separated. Cool, that's that entire end. We did that pretty quickly. Went through a bunch of different techniques as well. So let's go ahead and save really quick. And we can go ahead and tackle the other side now. I'm trying to find a good reference. So it has kind of a ribbed dial as well. It's definitely domed over on pretty much every single reference. So that's a really easy shape to make. I just want to see what's going on behind it. If we can see any details. Or if it's just going directly into there. It kind of seems like that. This is a pretty good photograph of the angle we're looking for. Interesting. Yeah, if it just connects in, it just connects in. I could have sworn I saw a different photo where it had that sort of sharp geared shape behind it as well. But all these references are kind of saying otherwise, which, hey, that saved us a little bit of time. This is actually a really good photo for inner reference. And it's kind of hollow on that side. Okay, well, if that's just the way it is, that's the way it is, right? Cool, that shouldn't take too long to make. In fact, we can probably copy this over and reuse like 99% of it since it's going to have that sort of ribbed end on it. We can just rotate 180 degrees and just sort of gut the inside of this. So let's start by maybe cutting this halfway through, because we do still want it to go in a bit. That bar has to go into something. But now we can merge that to center, and we can fill hole here to sort of cap it off. I'm gonna poke face as well, just because. We're gonna get rid of these sort of pieces, grow selection and delete. Delete that. Let's go ahead and bridge these across. That's not correct. Let's bridge one across and now bridge across, and it works. So we can delete those essentially. But we're just trying to create this rounded piece. It also seems to be quite a bit thicker, so we can have some fun with that. Make it quite a bit bigger. You can push this in and pull this out from here. Maybe not quite yet, actually. Let's extrude this in. Pull this out. Pull this out. And now start to bevel that. And that should probably do it. I'm gonna grow selection. I might want to pull this out a bit and scale it back. I might even want to make this thicker on this end and have it tapered in. But this is kind of resting against here. It just feels awkward having nothing there. But none of the reference is showing anything really there. This is a good time to bust out the 3D scan. The 3D scan is also kind of what helped me identify where this was placed and that I was behind it. Because, I mean, as you can tell, it's very muddied. But yeah, I mean, the scan just shows it going directly into there. So you can't really fake how that looks, I guess. Maybe we can make the back of this look a little bit more interesting. Seem to be a bit more hollow in some of the reference images, so maybe even just extruding this in, concaving it in, and beveling that. Just adds a little bit more visual interest. But yeah, I really guess that's that as far as those dials and knobs go. I think that'll probably do it for this part. But that finishes this page for us. We do have to make this connection piece, something we forgot that was attached to this guy. We forgot to add it before. But with that done, yeah, we loop back here and we're just sort of adding, yeah, these back pieces. We're adding in this ruler, we're adding in this Underwood tag, and then like those should be relatively quick, and then we're diving into the guts of things. That's kind of scary. But if we've made it this far, everything else should be fine as long as we continue with the methods we've been using, sort of breaking things down to their most simple, primal, basic primary shapes. It should be relatively simple. Thank you guys for watching this part though. Yes, very good to be back making these. Like I said, I was on a bit of a hiatus. But it feels good to be back making this kind of stuff. I always love making these tutorials, so this is going to take me forever to make realistically. Like, I'm curious to look back at the clock, like through every single episode and see how long this actually is going to take from start to finish, but progress is progress, even if it's taken a long time. Anyways, guys, thank you for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed, and I will see you all in the next part. Have a good one.